My ex-husband invited me to his wedding to humiliate me in front of 300 guests. He even paid for my travel. He had no idea I'd arrive in a Bentley or that I'd be bringing the two people who would end his wedding, his engagement, and his freedom in under 4 minutes. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Cream cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of stationery that costs more per sheet than most people spend on lunch. I turned it over in my hands at my kitchen counter in Malibu, my kitchen in my house overlooking water I had earned the right to look at, and I read Victor Whitmore's name printed in gold foil at the top. My ex-husband was getting married, and he had personally ensured I was on the guest list. I set the card down on the marble countertop, poured myself a coffee, read the handwritten note tucked inside, in Victor's precise architectural script. I hope you can attend, Elena. You deserve the opportunity to witness what a real wedding looks like among people who truly understand refinement and success. Please don't worry about transportation. I've already arranged and covered your travel expenses. I read it twice. Then I smiled for the first time in a way that didn't involve warmth at all, because Victor Whitmore had just made the most expensive mistake of his extraordinarily expensive life, and he had gift-wrapped the opportunity himself. Let me tell you who I was the last time Victor saw me. 5 years ago, on a Thursday evening in March, I was kneeling on the hardwood floor of the apartment we shared in Pasadena. Not metaphorically, literally kneeling, because I had been crying so hard my legs gave out, and the floor caught me when nothing else would. Victor stood above me in a pressed shirt, his weekend bag already packed and waiting by the door like he'd been planning this particular exit for weeks, which I would later understand he had. You are useless as a wife, Elena, he said. His voice was flat. Considered the way you'd announce a business decision rather than end a marriage. You have no money, no influence, and you cannot even give me children. You are nothing but a burden weighing down my ambitions, and I refuse to waste my life carrying you any longer. He picked up the bag. I'm leaving to find someone who understands success and prosperity. The door closed. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever experienced. I stayed on that floor for a long time, long enough for the light to change, long enough for my knees to ache and my throat to go raw and my brain to cycle through disbelief so many times it started to feel like furniture. Just another thing in the room, permanent and heavy. Then I stood up, went to the bathroom, opened the cabinet under the sink, and looked at the pregnancy test I had been too afraid to open all day. 2 lines. I sat on the edge of the tub and stared at the ceiling for so long I lost track of time entirely. Not one child. The ultrasound 6 weeks later would confirm what I already somehow suspected in the part of me that had always been better at reading situations than my heart was willing to admit. Twins, 2 daughters, Victor's daughters, who he would never know existed until the moment I chose to tell him, standing at the altar of his second wedding in front of 300 people, surrounded by the very kind of wealth and influence he had always believed I would never access. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I had been married to Victor Whitmore for 4 years when it ended. 4 years of understanding, slowly and then all at once, that I had married a man who categorized people the way a financial analyst categorizes assets, productive or a liability, rising or declining, worth keeping or worth cutting. For the first 2 years, I was an asset, young, presentable, domestic, devoted. I cooked beautifully. That was the one thing even Victor acknowledged freely. I created the kind of home that made his professional contacts linger after dinner parties. I smoothed the social edges of a man who was fundamentally brilliant and fundamentally cold, and for a while that combination worked. Then the fertility struggles began. 18 months of appointments, of tests with clinical names I had to look up, of procedures that cost more emotionally than financially. Victor attended 3 of those appointments. I stopped counting after he started checking his phone during the 4th. The red flags had been there earlier, of course. They always are. Victor's business partner at the time, a sharp, careful man named Daniel Reyes, pulled me aside at a company dinner 18 months into our marriage and said something I filed away without fully processing. Elena, you know Victor admires people who bring resources to the table. Just make sure you're protecting yours. I smiled and said I appreciated the advice. I didn't protect anything. I quit the small catering business I had been building since culinary school to focus on the marriage. I stopped taking clients. I let my professional network go dormant. I became, in Victor's taxonomy, entirely domestic, which meant entirely dependent, which meant entirely vulnerable. When he left, I had $4,200 in a checking account, equipment I'd sold 6 years earlier, and a skill set my husband had spent 4 years telling me was charming but inconsequential. He was wrong about almost everything. He was catastrophically wrong about that. The first 6 months were survival in the most literal sense. I was 8 weeks pregnant when Victor left, 12 weeks when I confirmed twins, and 4 months along when I set up a folding table in the kitchen of my $780 a month apartment and made my first batch of croissants to sell, 14 of them, sold to a neighbor who'd smelled them through the hallway. She asked if I could make more on Thursday. I said yes before I fully thought through the logistics. That was February. By June, I had a weekly order list with 22 names on it. By August, I had catered my first private event, a baby shower for 40 people, $600, every dish made in that apartment kitchen with the burner that only worked on medium. The twins arrived in November, Sophia and Clara, 7 pounds each, born 14 minutes apart, identical in the way that makes strangers stop and stare. I was in labor for 11 hours with no one in the waiting room. I named them myself, spelled them myself on the birth certificate, answered the father field with the legal honesty it deserved. deserved. I went home with 2 daughters and no one to hand them to, and I put them in the second-hand double bassinet I had assembled alone at 2 a.m. the week before, and I stood over them in the blue apartment quiet and understood something that rearranged the architecture of my ambition permanently. I was not doing this for myself anymore. I was doing this for them, and that changed everything about what I was willing to endure. The business grew the way real things grow, slowly, with setbacks, and then with a momentum that becomes hard to stop once it reaches a certain mass. Year 1, catering and weekend pop-ups, $41,000 gross, every dollar reinvested. Year 2, a commercial kitchen lease, a small staff of 3, a contract with 2 corporate offices for weekly lunch delivery, $180,000 gross. Year 3, the cafe, a 900 square foot space in Culver City that a commercial realtor named Diane Ferris, 15 years in LA hospitality real estate, direct and unsentimental, helped me negotiate into a below-market lease because the landlord had eaten my food at a charity event and wanted me in the neighborhood. The cafe was reviewed in 3 local publications within 4 months of opening. A food blogger with 400,000 followers posted about the morning pastry case, and the comments did not stop for a week. Year 4, a second location in Silver Lake, a third in Manhattan Beach, an investor meeting in a Century City conference room where I sat across from a private equity partner named Sandra Ohm, Stanford MBA, 22 years in consumer brand investment, who told me she had been watching my margins for 6 months and wanted to talk about scale. What do you want this to become? She asked. Something my daughters can be proud of, I said. She nodded once, opened her laptop, and we started talking numbers. Year 5, Whitmore Kitchen, my name, reclaimed deliberately, had 9 locations across Southern California, a wholesale pastry line in 34 grocery stores, and a valuation that would have made Victor Whitmore's jaw come unhinged if he had any idea it was attached to the woman he'd called a burden. He didn't know. I had been careful about that. I lived simply. I drove a sensible car to school pickup. I didn't appear in press photos. I let my legal name run through holding structures that kept my profile quiet in the circles Victor traveled. I wanted him to find out all at once. I just didn't know when. Then the cream cardstock arrived, and I understood the when had chosen itself. I called my attorney, Patricia Chen, the morning after the invitation arrived. Patricia had been my family law attorney since year 2, and had since become something closer to a trusted strategist. 12 years in practice, relentlessly precise, the kind of woman who speaks in complete sentences at all times and never once says, probably. Tell me about Victor Whitmore and Camille Laurent, I said. Patricia didn't pause. Her father is Etienne Laurent. Real estate, development, some private equity. There have been questions about Victor's business practices in 2 of the Laurent Group's joint ventures. Nothing filed yet. Quiet concerns. How quiet? Quiet enough that a wedding would make them go away. A family alliance tends to make business partners more forgiving. I thought about that. Patricia, I said, I need you to pull everything we have on the contracts between Whitmore Capital and Whitmore Kitchen. Silence for 2 seconds. Elena, tell me you haven't been doing business with, not directly, I said, but indirectly, 3 vendor relationships. I think money moved in ways he didn't document correctly. Another pause. How long have you known? Suspected, I said. 4 months. I needed enough to be certain before I did anything with it. And now I have an invitation to a wedding. I heard her exhale slowly. Give me 72 hours. Patricia came back in 48 hours with a forensic accounting consultant named David Park, CPA, 16 years in financial fraud investigation, formerly with the SEC, who had been quietly reviewing the transaction records she had subpoenaed under a civil dispute framework. We met in Patricia's Century City office on a Tuesday afternoon. David Park spread 3 documents across the conference table with the precision of a man who understood that the way you present evidence matters almost as much as the evidence itself. Whitmore Capital routed payments through 2 intermediary vendors who held active supply contracts with Whitmore Kitchen, he said. The vendor relationships created legitimate-looking billing structures, but the invoices don't correspond to services actually rendered. It's billing fraud. The amounts are significant. How significant? Patricia asked. Across 18 months, approximately $340,000 diverted from contractual obligations owed to your company. He said it the way accountants say things. Flat, accurate, without drama. The drama was entirely in the number. $340,000. Victor had used the shell of indirect business relationships to siphon money he owed my company, the company he didn't know was mine, to fund what turned out, upon investigation, to be a lifestyle he could not actually afford, including, David Park noted with clinical neutrality, a $47,000 engagement ring and the deposit on a coastal resort wedding that was going to cost significantly more. He had paid for his new wedding with money stolen from the company built by the woman he'd called useless. The irony was so complete it almost felt constructed. What are our options? I asked. Patricia laced her fingers together. Civil suit certain, criminal referral likely, the question is timing. I looked at the invitation still sitting in my bag. I need 2 more weeks, I said. Patricia studied me. Elena, 2 weeks, then we file everything. I just need to be somewhere first. She looked at me for a long moment with the expression of an attorney who knows exactly what her client is planning and has made a professional decision not to ask. 2 weeks, she said. I spent those 2 weeks doing 3 things. First, I had a private meeting with Etienne Laurent's general counsel, a woman named Renata Solis, who had handled legal matters for the Laurent Group for 11 years. I didn't go through back channels. I called directly, identified myself, and said I had documentation relevant to Victor Whitmore Whitmore's financial practices that the Laurent family would want to review before any formal family alliance was established. Renata Solis called me back within 4 hours. We met for 90 minutes in a quiet office in Beverly Hills. I brought David Park's summary report and Patricia's preliminary civil filing. I told Renata I wasn't there to destroy anything. I was there to make sure Camille Laurent's family had accurate information before they signed their name to a relationship with a man who had been defrauding business partners for at least 18 months. Renata read the documents carefully. She asked 4 precise questions. She thanked me professionally and told me she would be in touch. She did not tell me what the family would decide. She didn't need to. Second, I called my girls' school and arranged for them to miss 2 days for what I told the administrator was a family event. Sophia and Clara were 5 years old. They were curious, fearless, exhaustingly articulate, and looked so precisely like their father that strangers occasionally asked if they were child models cast for a Victor Whitmore lookalike campaign, which obviously no one knew was what they were asking. They had never met him. He didn't know they existed. I told them we were going to a fancy party by the ocean and that they needed to look beautiful. Clara said, "We always look beautiful, Mama." Sophia said, "Will there be food?" Those were my daughters. Third, I called Diane Ferris, my real estate broker, who had by now become something between a professional contact and a genuine friend, and asked her if she still knew the car service that had provided the Bentley Mulsanne for the Culver City location's grand opening event. She laughed. "Elena, what are you planning?" "Something I've earned the right to do," I said. The resort sat on a bluff above the Pacific Coast Highway, the kind of venue that appears in architectural magazines and costs enough per night that the pricing isn't listed anywhere public. Sweeping lawns, stone pathways, the smell of salt air, and expensive florals. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock. I arrived at 3:52. The silver Bentley Mulsanne moved up the resort's private drive at a pace that was slow enough to be noticed. 2 black SUVs followed. Discreet, professional, the kind of security detail that reads as either corporate protection or significant private wealth, because it was both. I heard the conversations pause before I stepped out. I felt them. There is a specific quality to the silence that falls over a crowd of wealthy, confident people when something interrupts their certainty about who belongs in a room. It has a texture, a held breath. I wore an emerald gown from a Milan house whose waiting list I had been on for 8 months. The cut was architectural, precise shoulders, clean lines, no ornamentation except the sapphire pieces my daughters had helped me choose at a jewelry appointment they treated as the greatest adventure of their 5-year lives. I stepped out. The whispers started immediately. "Is that Victor's ex-wife?" A woman's voice, close enough that she clearly wasn't trying to be private. Poor thing, she probably came just to see what a real wedding looks like. Victor was standing near the entrance with several of his business contacts. He saw me immediately. I watched his expression cycle through recognition, amusement, and the particular satisfaction of a man who believes he is about to watch something he arranged go exactly as planned. He expected me to look diminished. He expected gratitude or grief or the very specific humiliation of a woman who has spent 5 years being left behind watching the man who abandoned her upgrade. He wasn't prepared for what came next. I turned back toward the car. "Come, my darlings," I said. The door opened. Sophia stepped out first, smoothing her dress the way she had practiced approximately 40 times in the mirror that morning. Clara followed, took her sister's hand, and looked up at the resort with the frank assessment of a child who has been raised around beautiful things and is not easily impressed. They looked like him. There is no gentler way to say it. The shape of the eyes, the precise line of the jaw, the way they held their heads, that particular angle of contained confidence that I had once found compelling in Victor, and now recognized as a genetic inheritance rather than a character trait. Even from 20 feet away, through a crowd, in the golden, late-afternoon California light, the resemblance was so exact that several guests went still in a way that had nothing to do with social performance. It was recognition. Victor's face changed, not gradually, all at once. The satisfaction drained, replaced by something that moved through confusion and landed somewhere between shock and the specific terror of a man who has just understood that a door he believed closed has been open the entire time. We walked forward. His security moved to intercept, then stopped. Because Etienne Laurent's head of security, a composed, gray-suited man who had been briefed by Renata Solis 2 days earlier, had positioned himself near the entrance, and he gave the smallest nod, and the path stayed clear. Camille Laurent stood at the entrance to the ceremony space in a gown that cost more than most people's cars, flanked by bridesmaids and a wedding coordinator with a headset and the expression of a woman who has managed 400 events and has never seen anything like this one. She looked at me. She looked at my daughters. She looked at Victor. And in her eyes, I watched the specific calculation of a brilliant woman who has just received the piece of information that causes all the other pieces to reorganize themselves into a shape she should have recognized weeks earlier. Victor's voice had lost its certainty entirely. "Elena," he said, how is this Victor?" I kept my voice level, conversational, the tone I used in investor meetings when I needed to be heard clearly across a large conference table. I turned to Camille first. "Camille," I said, "your fiancé invited me here to humiliate me. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to protect you from something you deserve to know before you sign your name to a legal document with this man." The wedding coordinator's headset had gone very quiet. "The ring on your finger," I continued, "and significant portions of this wedding's budget have been funded using getting money that Victor illegally diverted from contractual obligations owed to my company over the past 18 months. Our attorneys have filed a civil suit this morning. A criminal referral is being reviewed by the DA's office. Your family's assets, if commingled with his in a marital estate, are at legal risk. I reached into my small evening bag and removed a single folded document. The executive summary David Park had prepared, 2 pages, precise and devastating. I handed it to Camille. She read it. She was fast. Brilliant, clearly. She read the way lawyers read, scanning structure first, then detail, then implication. The room was so quiet I could hear the ocean. Victor, she said. Her voice was measured. Cold in the way that isn't angry, but has moved through anger and come out the other side as something more permanent. Is this true? Camille, please. He took a step toward her. Let me explain the context. These are business disputes. They're completely... Is it true? She said again. Or is this another lie? His voice came out wrong. Too many words, too fast, none of them landing. The voice of a man trying to reassemble a narrative that has already collapsed. Her hand moved. The sound crossed the space between them and came back as an echo off the stone walls. Not a performance, not theatrical. A single, clean, definitive act. Fraud only survives when people choose to stay blind, Camille said, pulling the ring from her finger with the practiced calm of a woman who has made harder decisions than this one, and will make harder ones still. This wedding is over. Immediately. She handed the ring to her father without looking at it. Etienne Laurent pocketed it without a word. He looked at Victor with the expression of a man who has been in business long enough to have been defrauded before and has never made the same mistake twice. You'll hear from our legal team this week, he said, simply, then turned away. Victor's security, 2 men who worked for him, not the venue, moved toward the doors. The venue's security, coordinated with the Laurent team, positioned themselves at the exits with the smooth efficiency of people who had been briefed. Victor was not going to make a quiet exit. He sank, not metaphorically. His knees went to the floor of the ceremony space, in front of 300 people, in his tailored suit, on the polished stone that had been decorated for a wedding that was now being actively dismantled by a wedding coordinator speaking quietly into her headset. He reached toward Sophia and Clara. My daughters, he whispered. The word came out broken, like he was testing whether it belonged to him. Clara took a small step back. Sophia held her ground and looked at him with the direct, unreadable gaze of a 5-year-old who has been raised to look at things clearly. I stepped forward. 1 step was enough. You lost the right to say that, I said quietly. A long time ago. I took my daughter's hands. We turned. We walked. Behind us, 300 people stood in absolute silence in a ceremony space decorated for a marriage that would not happen. Flowers that cost $40,000 arranged around an altar that was no longer serving its intended purpose. A string quartet holding their instruments without playing. A wedding cake in a back room that no one would cut. We walked through the lobby, across the stone path to the car. The driver opened the door. Clara climbed in and immediately asked if there was a snack. Sophia looked back once at the entrance of the resort with the particular expression she makes when she is processing something and hasn't decided yet what to do with it. Mama, she said. Yes? That man looked like me. I buckled her seatbelt. I know, I said. Is that okay? I looked at her for a moment. Her face, his face, her face, and felt something move through my chest that was neither grief nor triumph, but something quieter and more durable than either. It means you're exactly who you're supposed to be, I said. Now get in. She got in. The door closed. The Bentley moved down the resort's private drive, back toward the PCH, back toward Malibu, back toward the life I had built from a folding table and 14 croissants and the specific, unbreakable knowledge that no one was coming to rescue me. I had rescued myself. I had brought 2 people into the world who didn't need rescuing at all. The civil suit settled 8 months later. $340,000 in restitution, plus legal fees, plus a separate settlement with the Laurent Group that I was not party to, but that industry contacts later described to me as career-ending in this market. Victor's investment firm dissolved within the year. Patricia Chen called me when the final settlement transferred and said, in her complete sentence way, the money is in the account. Everything is resolved. Thank you, I said. Elena, a pause. She didn't add unnecessary words. You built something real? I did. 2 weeks after the wedding, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Camille. I wanted to say thank you. You didn't have to do what you did the way you did it. You could have just filed the suit. I thought about that for a minute before I responded. You deserve to know before you signed anything. I would have wanted someone to tell me. She replied after a few minutes. For what it's worth, your daughters are remarkable. You can tell. I looked at the message for a long time. Then I put the phone down and went to the kitchen, where Sophia was attempting to teach Clara a card game she had invented with rules that changed whenever Clara was winning, and the evening light was coming through the Malibu windows the way it does in that last hour before dark, gold and low and warm, turning everything it touches into something worth looking at. Victor Whitmore had called me useless, a burden, without influence, without money, without value beyond what I could provide to his ambitions. He had said these things to my face while I was on the floor, believing I was alone. He never knew I was already carrying the 2 best things that would ever happen to me. He never knew that his judgment was not a verdict. It was a starting line, and I had been running ever since.